Hey everyone, and welcome to the first Planet Coaster 2 element tutorial. Now this is going to be a series where we go through and build popular elements using custom track pieces to make you move away from those in-game elements which aren't very good, let's be honest. So following the footsteps of my original Planet Coaster 1 series, we're going to kick things off with the very classic vertical loop. Now to get straight in there, the vertical loop is a pretty simple thing to build in premise. However, this game has a few limitations with the coaster builder which can make things a little bit annoying. So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to do it with currently no mods. We may end up with a track mod which will help this in the future, but this will currently be a no mods, completely vanilla. This will work on console, this will work on PC or any platform, so let's get going. Now the first thing I'm going to say is obviously the main thing you need to remember is that the size of the loop will depend on the size of your drop. How much speed you have going into the loop will depend on its size. So I've got a coaster which is about 132 foot tall, and it's got maybe a 110 foot drop, which means that going into it we're going to have a decent amount of speed, probably around 50-60 miles per hour. Let me just double check what we're getting at the bottom of this drop. About 60 miles an hour on the nose, which is pretty good. And what we're going to remember is that we need to make this loop smaller than the lift hill height. Ideally, for a good speed, we're probably going to want about 105, 110 foot. So to start building your loop, you're basically going to build a flat side profile of your loop. And the main thing to remember with B&Ms and new coasters is you need a teardrop shape. If it helps, you can build it out of longer pieces to give you a sort of rough shape first, and then you can go down and smooth it out to 4 meter or anything below that if we ever get to that point. So, to begin, we're going to start by using, I'm going to go with 4 meter, and then we're going to just smooth it a lot with the new smoothing tools. So we're going to start by pulling up at a pretty constant rate, but remembering to start tightening every sort of other piece, maybe like by 1 degree. So I was going up by 10 there, so maybe I want to go to 11. And basically you're going to be building this clothoid teardrop shape. Now, there's one big thing to remember whilst we currently don't have the mod, and that is that when we reach the 90-degree point, we are going to need to put some specific values in for the game to give us a chance at smoothing this, because you might run into some errors when you're building this because of the smoothing tool in its current state. So you can see here we're about 70 degrees. I'm going to pitch it up to about 80, and then we're going to get our next piece at 89 degrees. Actually, I don't like that radius. I'm going to quickly run that back. But basically, we're going to want this pitch point to be about 89 degrees. And now this should give us a good chance at trying to smooth it. So once we've reached 89 degrees, we can then pull it over to about, I don't know, maybe 110 degrees and start tightening as we hit the top of the loop, and then tighten really quickly to give us this nice shape. Now this loop is 107 foot tall, which is a perfect height, I think, for this drop, which would give us some good speed going into it, but also not too intense and we won't end up valleying or anything like that. One thing to remember is if you're building a B&M invert or any inverted coaster with a negative offset, remove the offset before you build the loop, as the game won't allow you to build pieces smaller than 4 meters because offset causes some weird issue with the heart line. So if we just, and a helpful little trick as well, you can either blueprint this loop, spin it around and just build it backwards, or if you delete, find the other angle, you can create a perfectly symmetrical loop every time. Then pick this one and go to 91. I've got to say, the new coaster builder feels so much more responsive than Planet Coaster 1's original one, and it feels so much better to use. And I'm really hoping that you guys are also enjoying playing Planet Coaster 2, because I am having a great time getting in and figuring out a bunch of things which I can't wait to make videos on, so definitely stay tuned for things like that in the future. But we're coming towards the bottom of the loop now. We just go to 44. I'm probably just going to eyeball the rest of this. So now that we've got the main profile of the loop, this should just be a flat intersect itself. If you're having issues with intersecting it, remove clipping, or if there's any limitations with track. I don't know if that's on by default now, but remove any collision or anything like that. And also make sure that you enable this very, very helpful feature here. Okay, this is the collision as well, so make sure you remove that. But there is an option in the sandbox, there it is, sandbox settings, to extend track limits. Now you want that in case you're building a coaster that wouldn't normally have any inversions, and it also just helps with like corners and things. So I've noticed that this loop sort of bottoms out at the top a little bit. So what I'm going to do is use the, well, first of all, you're going to have to go to edit mode now, and then pick this point and just pull it up. And you want to really exaggerate the shape so that we get a really nice clothoid shape. It might look lumpy, but when we smooth it, it will be far from. So what I'm going to do is start by smoothing it. So I'm going to go from the middle point, drag it all the way back to the base of the drop so that we get a nice consistent radius. I'm going to set to about maybe a 4 smooth strength, and we're just going to spam smooth. We're just going to spam smooth the whole half of the loop. And then we're going to flip over and do the other side. And you can see already we're getting this really, really nice shape. And then we're going to pick the whole thing and knock it down to a 3 and just smooth it a bit more. And you can see here the new smoothing tool is giving us this really nice shape. So now comes the fiddly bit. This will either work or it won't, because the game will currently hate us in its state. You're going to build a couple of pieces straight, go into edit mode, and you're going to select up to halfway, and we're going to start moving the loop over. And then what you might think, why are we doing this? And this makes building the curve easier, because when you try and build it manually with the curve initially, you get some really strange results. So I found that in both PC1 and in this game, this is still the best way to do it. So then we're going to go ahead and see if we can move that any more. Can we get any more movement? Okay, that's the maximum amount of movement we're allowed. We're going to grab the middle piece here and use the arrows. Sometimes it's helpful to build a beam between the 2 middle points to find the exact middle point. But for now, it is good. So I'm going to use these lines to figure out roughly where the middle is. That looks about right. And now what this is going to allow us to do is move the loop over even more. And we're probably going to want a good amount, about this distance here. This is a B&M Flawless coaster I'm using, so the clearance envelope for a B&M Flawless isn't too large, but it's also not too bad. So what we're going to do now is quickly delete this end piece, and this should be our loop. Now, this is where we start getting into finicky bits. So the first thing we're going to do as well, back into edit mode, get that in the middle, and go from here. Now, we're going to start gradually moving these pieces over until one of them gives us a track limits exceeded warning. You see here? This is very helpful now that we've got this sort of glowing bit, and that's telling me that that piece is going to cause some problems. But if we move it very gently, each time, just getting it into the right place, we're going to be creating a lovely curve. So obviously if your loop goes the other way, curve it the other way, and if it goes this way, then just follow what I'm doing on screen, and then we're going to just every so often gradually grab these points and just move them over to hopefully create a lovely smooth curve. The main premise of this is just so that we can build this curve in and then smooth it out. So we're going to try and move those pieces that were giving us warnings, just to see if we can get them a little bit closer to what I want. Okay, perfect. That looks really good. That's a really good entry. So now we're going to do the exact same on the other side. Get it to the point where it won't move anymore. Perfect. Okay, this is being a cooperative loop today. It's kind of doing what I want it to do, which is nice. So if you are getting issues with this, make sure you try and get your pieces to 89 degrees, just so the game doesn't really confuse itself and end up kind of going backwards. And you should be good to go. So again, I'm just going to adjust all this, and we're going to get ourselves hopefully a decent loop shape. That looks pretty good, I think. I'm going to maybe push that one in slightly more and then curve that. So the big difference between PC 1 and 2 is roll is incredibly smooth, I found, by just spam smoothing. So now that we have the rough shape of the loop, which looks pretty decent actually, I must admit, we're going to do a little bit of sort of smoothing now to make sure that we can get this into a position where it's going to be pretty good. So we might want to introduce a small amount of roll, just to reduce some lateral g-force. So roll it in towards the direction of the turn, just a tad. You only need a few degrees, as you're going to be, it's mostly just a loop is just a big turn over a big vertical surface, so it's really not, it doesn't need much in the way of banking. But just imagine if you were going through this, you'd be pushed to the left if we didn't introduce any sort of banking, and the game's new smoothing tool should equal it all out for you and give you a nice smooth result. Inverts are a little bit different to align things, as obviously the track is inverted, but the principle of the movement and the shaping still fully applies to them and everything else. Even if you're building a circular loop, you still apply all of these characteristics. You just might find that building small loops is where your problems start to come in. So we're going to select the whole thing, we're going to get a 3 smoothing, and we're going to press it. Okay, game seemed pretty happy with that. We're going to press it again, and then we're just going to keep going until we physically can't anymore. And to be honest, this looks pretty good. I think the game's... There we go. That to me, and basically all you're going to want to do is just spam smooth it, and all you're going to see here is that the game has introduced a bit of roll for us and smoothed it all out. So that is pretty much your loop complete. So let's give it a test ride, see what it looks like, and see if there's anything that we need to adjust. If you'd like to have a good view of what your shaping looks like, I recommend guest facing, back row, spin it round, and then this will give you a zero anticipation run to just check what everything's looking like so far, and I find that this is the best way to just see everything. So let's have a look and see what everything looks like. Now that's a pretty good loop. So I find that with the current state of the coaster builder, you probably won't be able to get the perfectly consistent radius of the loop turn just yet with the current state of the game. So when I introduce a new modded version of this tutorial, you'll be able to get those really perfect curves. But now you can see that the radius is much smoother, and everything just looks a lot nicer. I'm currently testing camera mod, which removes the anticipation. That was very kindly given some a little bit of early access to test. That will be coming out at some point, but at the moment it's a development build, not sure what's happening. So I'll show you what it looks like from this perspective, and then that way you can see how the track itself moves. And as you can see there, you've got that really nice consistent radius with no jittering, sort of juddering or anything like that, and it just gives you this really nice shape. And it also means that you can customize the entrance and exits of your loops with curves and banking and stuff without having to roll out, go into the element, and then, you know, it ruins it. So that is pretty much all there is to building loops. They're very simple. They might be a bit finicky with smoothing if you get track limits exceeded issues. Try and do the 89-degree trick. If you can, small loops might give you big problems, so just stick with it, and if you absolutely can't do it, then maybe the in-game loop until we can get the modded thing might work for very small applications. But for now, this is the custom loop method that I have found in Planet Coaster 2. No more backwards forwards, it's all spam smoothing now. The meta has very much changed. So thank you very much for watching this first element tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed, hope you found it helpful. If you have any more elements you'd like to see in the future, leave me a comment. I'll be working on a new series of those coming very soon, and I look forward to seeing all of your creations in the future. So stay tuned for more videos, and I will see you all next time.